In this lesson, we are going to look at ways to organize data. Specifically, we're going to look at histograms, a frequency polygon, and a cumulative frequency polygon. So first, let's look at this set of data, which has words per minute, and then the frequency is how many people can type that speed. So, for example, there are 3 people that can type between 100 and 149 words per minute. And there are 14 people in the next range, 21 in the next, 10 in the next, and 2 in the last. All right, so that's all that a frequency table means. Now, cumulative frequency, whenever you see that word cumulative, you should think of a sum. So this is just the sum of the frequencies. So as we go down this row, so we start at 3, and then when you add 14, you get 17, and then you add 21 to get 38, add 10 to get 48, and add 2 to get 50. So this last entry in the cumulative frequency row is actually just your total number of items. So there are 50 people that we're looking at, their typing speeds. All right, in the next column, we have relative frequency. And if you see this word relative, you should think percent. So if we have 50 people total, 3 out of 50 would be 6%. 14 out of 50 would be 28%. 21 out of 50 would be 42%. 10 people would be 20%, and 2 people would be 4%. All right. Now, relative cumulative frequency, so remember that word cumulative means sum. So this just means you take the sum of the percents. So again, we start at 6%. If you add 28, you get 34%. Add 42, you get 76%. Add 20, you get 96%, and then add 4, you get 100%. Now, one thing you should always notice, if you do this correctly, you should always end up with 100%, because you should always have 100% of your data when you're done. So if for some reason you didn't get 100%, it would be a good idea to go back and check your data. All right, so that is a frequency table. Next, we're going to organize that information into what we call a histogram. And a histogram has vertical bars showing the frequency. There's no gaps between the bars. The x-axis is always where you put your data, and then the y-axis is always going to be frequency. So for this set of data, on our x-axis, we have words per minute. And notice I have each of those ranges down here. So that's listed there. And then the y-axis is frequency. This right here, if you haven't seen that before, that little squiggle, just represents that we're skipping or jumping to 100 words per minute. So we're not including any ranges before that. All right. So let's go ahead and just jump right into this. First, remember from 100 to 149, we had 3 people typing that speed. So I'm going to use a ruler, and I'm going to go up to 3. And then this would be my first bar of my histogram. Between 150 and 199, we had 14 people. So that would be up to here. And then we would go over and down. Right. I'm actually going to make that a little bit wider. Okay. In the next range, we had 21 people typing between 200 and 249. So that's going to be a little bit above 20. All right. And then next we had 10 people between 250 and 249. or 299. And then for 300 to 349, we just had 2 people typing that speed. All right, so that would be our histogram representing this data. And one thing that's a good idea for someone who's reading your histogram is to put the total, or in other words, the frequency for each of those bars or each of those ranges, just so that they know exactly how many data points are in each of those bars. All right. So next, let's look at a frequency polygon. All right, so on your vertical axis, you're still going to have your frequency, or it could be your relative frequencies, so it could be those percentages. And that's actually what we're going to use here. We're going to do the relative frequency, just so you can see what that looks like. So that's going to be the percents. So I'm going to use that relative frequency column when I create this frequency polygon. All right, the horizontal axis is still going to be labeled with your data. And if it's a range, you always use the middle score. So for example, between 100 and 149, the middle number we're going to use is 125. And then for 150 to 199, we're going to use 175. For 200 to 249, we'll use 225, and so on. So notice that these are listed down here on the horizontal axis. All right, so one other thing you should notice is that the polygon begins and ends on the horizontal axis. So let's jump into that and you'll see what that looks like. So we're going to put a dot at 75, 0. Okay, that's always going to be where your first entry is. All right, and then at the next point at 125, we had a frequency or a relative frequency of 6%. So I'll put a point there. For the next one, we had a relative frequency of 28%. All right. For the next, we had 42%. All right, for 275, that range, we had 20%. And then for the final one, 325, we had 4%. All right, and then we are gonna put a last point down on the horizontal axis at 375. Okay, so now we can go ahead and connect these with a straight edge or with a line. And then this is why it's called a frequency polygon, because it does create a polygon that is bounded by the horizontal axis. So one other thing you should notice is if you look at this shape of your frequency polygon here and compare it to the shape of your histogram, the shapes should be relatively similar. So they both have a peak towards the middle. The left-hand side is a little bit steeper or larger. There's more data in it. So that's just one thing that you should recognize. All right, and then the third way we're going to look at representing data is called a cumulative frequency polygon. Or it could be a relative frequency cumulative frequency polygon, just depending on how you're representing your data. So your vertical axis is either going to be your relative frequencies or your relative cumulative frequencies, which remember those are just going to be adding up your frequencies as you go. The horizontal axis is still going to be labeled with your data. Now if it's a range, you're going to use the largest score of the range. So, for example, for the range from 100 to 149, we're just going to label the 149. All right, and you can see that here, these are just the top numbers of the range. Because if we're doing a relative frequency, we're adding things up as we go. So we always use the largest part of the range. Okay, so when we start this, we're always going to start our first point at 0 because we didn't have anyone who typed lower than 100 words per minute. All right, and then at 149, we are up to 3 people. And I'm going to label this with 3 so we know where that is. And then at 199, that next range, we added up to, let's go back to our table. So we got 3, then 17, then 38, then 48, and we're going to end at 50. So this is where I'm getting these numbers from. All right, so next we now have 17 people. And then we were up to 38. All right, and then 48. And then lastly, we ended at 50, which I think I have up a little bit too high. All right, so this was 48, and then we stopped at 50. Okay, and we can go ahead and connect those again with a straight edge. And then a relative cumulative frequency is always going to just stop at your high point. So it's going to start at the bottom, end at the top. And the top is going to be your total frequency. Okay. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about is those 3 measures of central tendency, so the mean, median, and mode, and then how you can find those if you're given frequency tables. Right, so in example 5, we have listed the sales tax rates to the nearest whole percent for the 50 states in a recent year. So this first entry just means there's 5 states that have a 0% sales tax. There's no states that have a 1%. There's 1 state that has a 2%, and so on. Right, so here's how you can find the mean given a frequency table. Well, first we need to know the total, and if we find the cumulative frequency, that's going to help us with a few things. So I'm just going to add up our frequencies. 5 plus 0 is, 5 plus 0 is 5, plus 1 is 6, plus 0 is 6, plus 10 is 16, plus 10 is 26, plus 18 is 44, plus 5 is 49, and then 50. So notice we get 50 because there are 50 states, and this is our total number of items, which makes sense because we know there's 50 states. So if you want to find the mean from a frequency table, what you can do is you actually add up in the numerator your total, and to do that here, we actually take our frequency. So for the first point, it was 5 states, so that was our frequency, times the data. Right, so there were 5 states with a 0% rate. Or there were 18 states with a 6% rate. So you take your frequency times your data. All right, and then what you do is you divide that by the total. So I did this ahead of time. If you add up everything in the numerator, you get 243. And if you divide that by 50, you get about 4.86% would be the mean sales tax. The median is your number right in the middle. So if there's 20 or 50 total items, right in between the 25th and the 26th would be where your median is. That'd be right in the middle. So right here, actually I'm going to do this in a different color. We'll do blue. Right here, we have the item number is in the middle at 25, 26. So right in between the 25th and the 26th. And then notice all of these states at the 25th to 26th entry, we have a 5% interest. So the median would simply be 5%. That would be the middle term. All right, and then the mode is actually really easy to find in a frequency table. Whatever entry has the highest frequency is your mode, so a 6% sales tax is the most repeated entry. All right, in example 6, we're going to do that same thing. Find the 3 measures of central tendency for the given histogram. So notice that in this histogram, we have family size, and then we have how many households have that family size. So there's 4 households with a family size of 1, 5 with a family size of 2, 8 with a family size of 3, 5 with a family size of 4, and 1 household with a family size of 5. All right, so we're going to find the mean, median, and mode. Before we can find the mean, we have to find the total. And our total is just going to be these numbers here added up. All right, so we're just going to add 4 plus 5 plus 8 plus 5 plus 1. So we have 23 households here, or 23 items in our list. All right, so let's go ahead and calculate the mean. Remember, you can do that by taking your frequency times the data. So 4 times 1 plus 5 times 2 plus 8 times 3 plus 4 times, 5 times 4. It's your frequency times the data, and then 1 times 5. And we divide that by the total, which we just found was 23. So if you do this, you will end up with 63 over 23. So the mean family size is about 2.739. All right, the median is your middle number. So if we have 23 items, it turns out that the 12th item is going to be the middle, right? Because then you would have 11 on one side and 11 on the other side, and then that 12th item would be your middle item. So here we have 4, 5, that makes 9, and then 10, 11, 12 is going to be somewhere in here. So that gives us a family size of 3. So the median is 3. All right, and then lastly, the mode is the most repeated one. That's really easy to see in a histogram. Whatever bar in the histogram is the biggest gives you the mode. So the mode is actually also 3. And that just tells us that most households have a family size of 3. All right, so there's the end of lesson 1, day 2. If you have any questions, just feel free to get a hold of me. All right, see you guys.